Quickly, I make a decisive strike as my unbreakable stops me dead hard living on borrowed time. As my unbreakable will grows dead hard, I make a decisive strike on borrowed time. Unbreakable, I send a decisive strike dead hard towards my foe on borrowed time. Wait. Is this all we have?
No, there was other stuff, but anytime someone could use it, they made it weaker.
So they nerfed everything else, and they still never touched Noed?
Well,
they buffed it.
All they ever did was buff Noed? And nerfed anything but those 4 perks that ever showed up in the Survivor meta? What's the point of the video then? 80% of every match is Survivors, and they get 4 perks. Game dead.
You suck.
Oh, okay. Fine, we'll talk about it. Sorry, ladies in Mental Gen. We gotta talk about the death of Dead by Daylight. Smarter and more popular streamers than me have already pointed out that the numbers for DBD's average players have been on their longest sustained decline in the history of the game, beginning the same month that skill-based matchmaking was launched. It's no secret that every single person with a positive view on this new system works at behavior, and likely has a stake in it. The invisible, untraceable MMR is a thorn in the side of your average to above average player. There does not appear to be any semblance of DK. By that I mean taking an entire month off of playing killer will leave you to face survivors competing at the peak of your MMR. The surprising factor of this MMR too, considering the developer's unusual attachment to it, is how quickly it gets disregarded. If you're playing killer, it won't take long at all to find a lobby. The reason for that is because 4/5 of every match is survivors. Survivors that are waiting 10, 15, 20 or more minutes for a match. And about 50% of the time, that match they waited 20 minutes for gets them paired with a major differential of MMR, resulting in an Ash rank killer with 2 perks unlocked getting stomped by a 4-man Swift in about 3 minutes. This kind of matchmaking isn't fun for the killer. It leaves the survivors to spend the majority of their time in a lobby simulator and doesn't even create any sort of semblance of dynamic gameplay. Retention is very important, and I just cannot imagine anyone waiting 20 minutes for a match just to get face camped or tunneled out of a match in 2 to 3 minutes, turning around and saying,
"Let's do that again."
The worst part is that even as a seasoned player, you can't complain too much about the camping and tunneling because in the current MMR condition, it's almost a requirement on the killer side. With all of these factors at play and with alternatives in like and unlike games on the rise, it's not hard to see why folks are flocking for funner fights. Okay, understandably, people disagree with the devs. They make the game and we play the game. And ultimately, only those on the developer side have the proper perspective to be able to resolve any of the given issues in the game. That said, holding an entire Q&A just to tell fans no to every single thing they'd like to see is quite extreme. And it seems like that event could have just been skipped altogether. That, coupled with the Dowsy drama.
For those of you that don't know, popular streamer Dowsy had his Twitch in-game cosmetics disabled for mocking a developer at behavior over their universally disliked Q&A.
Leaves little room for hope that these devs are working towards a common goal with the audience. There seems to be a fracture in communication as well as a general defensive stance taken by behavior in recent times. A poor attitude isn't exclusively the domain of the developers either. On the survivor and killer side, we can see what kind of community has been fostered in Dead by Daylight. I personally believe moments like the light in the fog display the enormous love and connection between all Dead by Daylight players. However, as alternatives to the game come out and people involve themselves in other communities, we're left with a distillation of those who remain. There seems to be a general attitude of wanting to feel like you're bullying someone as survivor, and I will be the first to admit that I am extremely guilty of this. It's really one of the last things that are still fun to do in the game, which is very unfortunate because with their MMR being the way that it is, a lot of times you can behave quite shitty without consequences on this game. And I believe this bully complex stems specifically from a lack of variety in the game and a desire to make stale gameplay more exciting, which leads me to point 3. Anyone who knows me knew this would be in here. My personal opinion is that stagnation is the #1 factor dragging down Dead by Daylight in 2022. If you're not winning as survivor, the main root cause is likely just that you're using perks other than Dead Hard, DS, Borrowed Time, and Unbreakable, and the killer happens to be taking the game seriously at that point. If you're not winning as killer, the main root cause is likely that you're going out of your way not to tunnel or camp any of the survivors out of the game, and the survivors happen to be taking the game seriously at that point. These two forces, the survivor meta and the killer hostage situation, suck. The pressure put on the killer to perform constantly against a team of 4, coupled with the desire to be a bully found in most Survive with Friends groups, leaves little to no reward for playing an honorable camp and tunnel free game. And Lord knows waiting 20 minutes just to get camped isn't very rewarding either. On the killer side, the incentive to camp is clear. A 3v1 match is much easier than a 4v1. The only real consequence to camping at this point in time is the boredom one gets from sitting around a hooked survivor, and perhaps if you're a Devour Hope fan, you're missing out on a few stacks. But let's be honest, unless you brought an entire build centered around protecting Devour Hope, it's a miracle if you get any value out of it before it's broken. On the survivor side, things are bleak. Anytime a perk threatens to alter the meta even a little bit, it will become a tool for bullying, as are all meta perks, and will then be nerfed as a bad decision by the devs. There was a point this year where Boil Over had been buffed as a perk and was becoming viable. I played Killer during that time, and of course there was a few kinks that needed to be hammered out, a few positions that made the perk unbeatable, but overall it filled me with excitement to see survivors wiggling out extra fast and forcing me to think on my feet about things like that. I was enraptured to put Boil Over into my build to at least try out a new strategy in this monotonous game, but alas, it was not to be. Boil Over was to be nerfed back into obscurity. This is not a one-off instance either. It happens historically to any survivor perk that threatens behavior's precious survivor meta. If you've ever seen me play, first off, I'm sorry, and second off, that means you know I'm not exactly the best at this game. I mostly play Survivor, and I'm almost always in a Survive with Friends so that I have someone to talk to on those long lobby excursions. All of this is merely opinion and should be taken with a grain of salt. That said, I personally feel as though the solution to this matter is quite simple and only requires a little bit of spine on the part of behavior. Declare blood points as the win condition. Stay with me here. Rather than being paired in matchmaking by our kills or escapes in any individual match, people who escape with minimal blood points because they play hyper efficiently would be paired with camping killers who also end up with low scores to play more efficiently. Survivors who love to get into long chases would be paired with killers that like to avoid tunneling. Imagine the impact on the attitude of the community. Sure, you'd still have bully squads and bad actors, but at the end of the day, if the win condition contradicts the characteristics of that kind of behavior, there will be less justification for that kind of play. And to reiterate, this win condition would push those kinds of players towards the competition they need to be in. And for stagnation, if you're the type to try experimental and fun builds, you'll theoretically be getting paired with people who kind of do the same thing. Big points with big points, small points with small points. And of course there would need to be caveats like being camped out of a game not counting against your MMR, but that's where the devs would need to shine. I might be totally wrong here. The game might die regardless, or who knows, maybe it'll wind up with a new audience that leaves us old heads just being shaken off like the ticks get shaken off of a wet dog. This game means so much to me and to friends of mine that it would be emotionally devastating to see it die. But if nothing else, this video was a cry to save it. Thank you for watching.